been more than confused.com. I'm so confused I've given up the ghost.com.
A very good morning to each and every one of you. It's so nice to see all of you here. And I'm glad I can share a portion of God's Word with you once again. I would imagine that every one of us here have dreamed at one time or another in our lives. We may have dreamed about being successful in business, in sports, in parenting, or in education. Whatever our dream is, we should never give up on it. Especially if our dream is a God-given one. This morning, I'm going to talk about the life of Joseph, a man who literally dreamed for God, and a man who attained those dreams in his lifetime. The life of Joseph covers 13 chapters in the Old Testament book of Genesis. I'm going to try to summarize enough of his life for us to get a handle on how God used an ordinary person to achieve extraordinary things. When Joseph was 17 years old, he had two dreams that showed he would become a great man and that all his brothers would bow down to him. His brothers became very jealous of him. One day, while out in the field, they sold Joseph into slavery to some Ishmaelite merchants, who in turn sold him to one of Pharaoh's officials in Egypt named Potiphar. Joseph's brothers lied to their father, leading him to believe that some wild animals had killed Joseph. Now Joseph found favor with Potiphar. The Lord was with him at all times. So Potiphar placed Joseph in charge of his entire household. God's blessings came upon that household. Now Potiphar's wife was attracted to Joseph, and she tried to seduce him. When Joseph refused her advances, she accused him of attempting rape. Potiphar then had Joseph put in prison. While Joseph was in prison, he interpreted two dreams for some other prisoners. After 2 years, Joseph was called upon to interpret a dream for Pharaoh, who is the leader of the entire Egyptian nation. Now God interpreted the dream for Pharaoh, using Joseph as his vessel. Joseph told Pharaoh that Egypt would have 7 prosperous years, followed by 7 years of famine. Joseph then provided Pharaoh with a plan that would see Egypt through the 7 years of famine with an abundance of crops. Pharaoh subsequently named Joseph as the most powerful leader in Egypt, second only to Pharaoh himself. Now, in the course of time, Joseph's family back at home was struck by famine. Eventually, Joseph's brothers and fathers and all of their families all came to Egypt, and they bowed down to Joseph, just as he had dreamed so many years ago. Now, before you get the wrong impression, know that the main reason for Joseph's dream was not to get people to bow down to him. The main point of this historical account of Joseph's dream is to show that God will use the man or the woman that is fully devoted to him. While you might not have been given a dream while you were sleeping, perhaps God has instilled within you a dream or vision for your future. The story of Joseph should encourage each and every one of us not to give up on that dream or vision. When people are opposed to our dream or vision, don't give up on it. We need to know for certain that our dream or vision is pleasing to God. If it is, it does not matter who tries to stop us. We need to move forward on that dream or vision. We need to be tactful. We need to be loving. But we must continue to move forward on our dream or vision. Tell me, did Joseph face opposition? You better believe it. Let's turn our Bibles to Genesis 37, verse 9 to 10. It says in our Bibles, then he had another dream, and he told it to his brothers. Listen, he said, I had another dream, and this time the sun and moon and 11 stars were bowing down to me. When he told his father as well as his brothers, his father rebuked him and said, what is this dream you had? Will your mother and I and your brothers actually come and bow down to the ground before you? Now let's go further down to verse 18 to 20. But they saw him in the distance, and before he reached them, they plotted to kill him. Here comes that dreamer, they said to each other. Come now, let's kill him and throw him into one of these cisterns, and say that a ferocious animal devoured him. Then we'll see what comes of his dreams. His brother Reuben persuaded the rest of his other brothers not to kill Joseph. Now, most individuals who will oppose our dreams or visions do not have dreams or visions themselves. When we receive a dream or vision from God for the future, we need to have the faith to step out into whatever God has called us to do. The negative people around us will try to stop us. They will try to discourage us, and they will say negative things about us. However, if our dream or vision is truly from God, we must move on with our dream or vision, no matter who tries to stop us. when someone is negative about our dream or vision, one of the first things that we need to do is to evaluate what that negative person has achieved or accomplished for God in his or her life. Usually, there is nothing much to speak about. They assume that since they do not have the faith to move out into the wilderness, then you should not either. Just tell the individual in as nice a way as possible to hit the road and get out of your way. Why? Because you are going places, whether they are or not. When we experience serious setbacks, we must not give up on that dream or vision. Everyone who has ever done anything for God has been knocked down plenty of times on the journey. As a matter of fact, if we never experience failure, that means we have not tried hard enough. So tell me, what setbacks did Joseph experience? Well, first, his family rebuked him for his dream. Then he was sold into slavery. He then found favor with Potiphar, only to be accused of attempted rape. Next, he was thrown into prison. Then he was placed in charge of the other prisoners, where he interpreted a dream for another prisoner. And that prisoner was supposed to help get him out of prison. But then he was forgotten for 2 years. Then at last, Joseph appeared before Pharaoh. And soon his dream is fulfilled. Now, Joseph's entire life was a series of setbacks. And finally, the accomplishment. What about you? Are you letting some setbacks keep you from fulfilling your dream? Perhaps you have dreamed about being a successful parent. However, you did not grow up in a healthy family environment. That your brothers and sisters is a real setback, but it can be overcome. We need to recognize our setbacks for what they are, and then take the necessary steps to push forward. We need to learn from others who can be models for our dream or vision. Perhaps you have dreamed of getting a college education, and it may be taking you 4, 5, or even 6 years. Don't let that stop you. Recognize it for what it is. Plan your steps and then conquer. Perhaps God has given you a call to be a minister or a missionary, and you have a lot of people trying to talk you out of it. Move out on faith and watch God lead you. Do not look at setbacks in a negative way. Recognize them as stepping stones to accomplishments, and you will see your dream or vision fulfilled. When it takes a long time to realize our dream or vision, we must not give up on that dream or vision. The great American actress and fashion model can Candice Bergen once said, "Dreams are by nature cursed with short lifespans." It took Joseph over 20 years to see his dream or vision fulfilled. Dreams or visions are considered long before they are achieved. The period between the birth of a dream or vision and the realization of that dream or vision is what we call the process period. Now, the process period can be filled with doubts, with adversity, with surprises, with changes, with good days, bad days, and ugly days. Often, during the process period, we are faced with a dilemma. Do I quit and give up, or do I go on? As we run life's race, Joseph shows us that the journey is always worth the cost. If the Lord God is in it. If we were able to talk to Joseph right now, I believe he would offer these 3 words of encouragement. Number 1, God will always be with us. And I repeat, God will always be with us. Number 2, God will develop us during the down times. And number 3, God will finish what he has started. Joseph understood God's presence in his life no matter what he was going through. When Joseph was sold to Potiphar, the Bible tells us in Genesis 39 verse 2, the Lord was with him and he prospered, and he lived in the house of his Egyptian master. After Joseph was accused of attempted rape and thrown into prison, we are told in Genesis 39 verse 23, the warden paid no attention to anything under Joseph's care because the Lord was with Joseph and gave him the success in whatever he did. These statements, the Lord was with Joseph, have all of us scratching our heads at the irony. From son to slave, from slave to convict, the Lord was with Joseph. We might have thought that these statements would have applied to the good times in Joseph's life. However, the Bible states the truth, even when the truth appears to be illogical. What is even more amazing is the fact that after this point in time, after Joseph begins to prosper and is living out the life, the dream or his vision, we do not find these statements anymore. It should strike us that Moses, the inspired author of Genesis, does not accentuate the reality of God's presence in Joseph's life. From son to slave, the Lord was with Joseph. From slave to prisoner, the Lord was with Joseph. From prisoner to prime minister, nothing. What is going on here? Could it be that we need the reminder during the hard times, but during the good times, God's presence appears self-evident? Is it possible that God is more active in our lives when we are hurting and need of His presence? Could it be that in God's hierarchy, the good times are only the good times, but the bad times are the best of times? When is the Lord with us? When is the Lord with us? The Lord is always with us. When do we need to know that? Always. However, like Joseph, we need to feel God's presence most when our circumstances hide Him from our view. God will develop us during the down times if we let Him. Did you see it? In the 13 chapters of the Bible that records Joseph's life, we cannot find a single instance with all the garbage that Joseph had to put up with, where Joseph complained about his circumstances. When Joseph was sold into slavery, he took the time to develop himself into the best household servant that Potiphar had. He did not whine because he was a slave. He set his sights on being the best slave there ever was. When Joseph was thrown into prison, he did not whine about it. He used that time to develop himself, and as a result, he was placed in charge of the other prisoners. When Joseph was brought before Pharaoh, and God interpreted Pharaoh's dream, Joseph used the skills that he had developed in the down times to explain to Pharaoh how he could overcome the dilemma of the famine. I know that this is one of the hardest lessons for us to learn, but we need to learn it. God will use some of the worst experiences in our lives in order to develop us, so that when it is time for our dream or vision to be fulfilled, we will be ready to take charge. Know that God will finish what He has started. If our dream or vision is a God-given one, God will complete it in our lifetime. Many years after Joseph's brothers had sold him into slavery, they came to him to beg for forgiveness. But Joseph had this to say to them. Let's turn our Bibles to Genesis 50, verse 20. So Joseph said, "You intended to harm me, but God intended it for the good, to accomplish what is now being done, the saving of lives." Joseph could look back upon his entire life and see that God was leading him towards the fulfillment of his dream or vision. Even those things that were meant to hold him back, the many stumbling blocks that were thrown in his pathway, God was able to use them to further His purpose. God never leaves His business unfinished. If our dream or vision is part of God's business, He will accomplish it in our lives. Finally, as I close, the following story is told of the late great American swimmer Florence Chadwick. It was a foggy morning on the 4th of July 1952. Florence intended to swim the channel from Catalina Island to the California coast. Now, long-distance swimming was not new to her. She had been the first woman to swim the English channels in both directions. The water was numbing cold on that day. The fog was so thick that she could hardly see the boats that were in her party. Several times, sharks had to be driven away with rifle. She swam more than 15 hours before she asked to be taken out of the water. Now, her trainer tried to encourage her to swim on since they were close on land. But when Florence looked, all she saw was fog. So she quit. She was only half a mile away from her goal. Later she said, "I'm not excusing myself, but if I could have seen the land, I might have made it." It was not cold or fear or exhaustion that caused Florence Chadwick to fail. It was the fog. 2 months after her failure, she walked off the same beach into the same channel and swam the distance, setting a new speed record because she could see the land. As I am now, I trust that you can see the foundation for realizing your dream or vision. It is found in God alone. Let Him take you like He did Joseph on the journey of a lifetime. May God richly and abundantly bless each and every one of you. Amen.
Amen.